Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views on News. I'm your host Umar Khalid Bhatt. And our topic of the day is about Pakistan-Afghanistan relation, the Afghan peace process, the intra-Afghan dialogue, and what has been happening on Pakistan-Afghan border. As you very well know, Chief of the Army Staff did pay a visit on the Afghan border, and he also talked about vigilance that is required. We know that there is tension on the Pakistan-Afghan border. At the same time, there is an Afghan Taliban delegation that is here in Islamabad that met with the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi as well. They talked about various important issues and in particular peace in the region. Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab also said that both sides during the meeting exchanged their perspectives and Taliban considers Pakistan's role positive for peace. Pakistan has always believed, as you know, in an Afghan-led and an Afghan-owned peace process. But how is it all going to move along further? We have the US elections coming up. We have the US President Donald Trump who has said he wants to remove the US troops from the area. We have tensions between the Afghan government and the Afghan Taliban. We have the talks between the Afghan Taliban and the Afghan government that haven't yet begun in Doha because of the swap of the Taliban prisoners. There are a certain number, a very small number of prisoners that are now left to be sent to the Afghan Taliban, which the Afghan government say cannot take place at the moment because they are hardcore criminals. Well, let's see how this all pans up. But to talk more about the whole span of the Afghan peace process, Pakistan-Afghan relationship, the role of Pakistan in the Afghan peace process and how it's all going to pan along in the days and months to come. We've been joined by two very important guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. On my very right is Brigadier Retired Tipu Sultan Saab. Brigadier Retired Tipu Sultan Saab is a senior analyst and a frequent guest on our shows. Thank you, sir, to have joined us. Our second guest of the day is Syed Muhammad Ali Saab. You're a foreign affairs expert. Ali, it's a pleasure to have you on board. And it's one of the first times we are going to talk face to face in this show. So it's the pleasure is all mine. Let's put it that way. Let's start with you, Tipu Sultan Saab. Tipu Sultan Saab, Afghan peace process. When we talk of an Afghan peace process, we talk of peace in the region. We talk of strong relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan. That are the first things that come to your mind. But of late, there are many question marks as to the future of this Afghan peace process, whether it be the intra-Afghan talks, whether it be the tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan on the border, or other issues concerning Afghanistan, even the future of Afghanistan. Why are there so many question marks? Who is to be blamed?
Well, because the Doha agreement, which was signed sometimes before and by March next, the agreement had to go into force by releasing about 5,000 prisoners held by the Kabul government and 1,000 held by the Taliban. The time frame, they are lagging in time frame. I mean, Afghanistan has gone.
But why are they lagging in time frame? I mean, I'd like to understand that.
Chiefly because Ashraf Ghani had said that they were not part of the Doha peace agreement, and they did not have any tacit understanding.
But hadn't they agreed finally for these intra-Afghan talks? Then why is there this stalling process?
Give me a couple of minutes. Well, in order to legitimize that, only a few weeks back, a couple of weeks back, they had a lawyer Jirga in Kabul.
Yes.
In which they got it approved that they're okay, fine. The consensus was that they're going to release the Taliban prisoners.
All right.
But I will tell you that Afghanistan has come a long way. The Americans first, when we decided to fence the border with Afghanistan, the Americans opposed it, the Indians opposed it, the Afghans opposed it. And the Americans said, oh, the Durand line is a disputed line and all that. It's an international border.
Of course.
Let me tell you that in 1893 or something, when it was decided in Rawalpindi, in the Ministry of Defense building over there, which was known as Calcutta building because of East India Company, they ruled there. And they, the entire British force was poised towards the Soviet Union and Afghanistan and all that. On the same day, the Afghan government, Abdur Rahman, signed an agreement with the British government to demarcate 3 borders.
All right.
With Russia along the Oxus River, with Iran and with Pakistan.
All right.
They are international borders. Why not the border with Pakistan? It is part of the same agreement. Agreed over and over and over again.
All right.
Now, I come to the point that you raised. See, what has happened is that now in the congressional hearing meetings, The Americans have said, no, this is an international border and Pakistan is doing the right thing by fencing it, because we don't want the terrorists to cross either to Afghanistan
Exactly,
or to,
that is the right
or to
point.
Pakistan. And now that there are elections, there is an alacrity induced in the American thinking, in the Republican government, that this peace process must go forward.
Fine.
The hitch is, the big problem is that where is that line on which the Taliban and the Kabul government are going to agree on a peace process of reconciliation, where the Kabul government understands that it is a democratic process in which they believe. The Taliban go exactly the opposite side. They said, oh, if you agree that the Americans are going to fully withdraw, and if you agree to impose Sharia law, then we are for you.
All right, I'm going to cut you short here. Ali, when Brigadier Tipu Sultan Sahab calls about a hitch or hitches between the two Afghan parties that are of course party to this intra-Afghan dialogue, and when he talks about different issues that both sides have, weren't these issues settled apart from the swap of prisoners that also was agreed by the Loya Jirga, that yes, you can give the rest of the prisoners? Weren't most of the thorny issues between the two sides agreed upon, or are there still questions?
Well, thank you. I think the fundamental reality of Afghan politics is that unfortunately most of the time the struggle for power is resolved through violent means. So even if the transition is peaceful or political, sometime that does not last and that leads to violent struggle of power. What Pakistan as a friend of the Afghan nation is trying to do in collaboration with other countries is to encourage the Afghans to, for the first time, try to learn from their mistakes. We have experience of signing agreements in Khane-e-Kaaba, and then they were, they did not last long.
Exactly. The outcome wasn't positive.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we think, as Shah Mahmood Qureshi rightly pointed out, that it is an unprecedented opportunity. It is very important that all Afghan factions, including Afghan Taliban, must realize that time is very critical.
Do they realize? I mean, this is very important.
No, all of
is
them
the time factor being realized by both parties?
It's a window of opportunity which must be effectively and timely tapped, because let's link it up with five factors. Number one, the US elections is just 2-3 months
away.
So the tension is also rising within the Beltway. So the Republican administration want to translate this into a victory which they can sell to their voters. That is their compulsion. So now the Afghans.
Has it become political instead of?
It is very political, but the thing is that Afghans need to realize, take it as an opportunity for them, that the time is running out for the US administration. So use it as an opportunity to mend fences and come to an understanding which is peaceful and lasting. But secondly, let me point out two more important factors which I think your audience needs to understand. This dialogue, our Afghan friends are in Islamabad, and you know that this has happened after 3 very critical events that your audience needs to understand. Pak, Afghanistan and China trilateral dialogue. That was very important, that China, Pakistan and Afghanistan discussed the Afghan future in a regional attempt to come up with a peaceful and progressive and prosperous Afghanistan. That Afghan nation need to understand that even if the US leaves, US military leaves, they need
to, they will never leave, but there will be a minimum amount of troops
present. But they need to have a political future and economic progress to hope for. The third is, after that, we also had recently the Pak-China bilateral strategic dialogue, in which Afghanistan was also discussed.
Yes.
So China is a very important factor in Afghan future, because they now are beginning to see Afghan future as part of their larger BRI
China-Pakistan economic corridor, an extension of that.
But BRI project, and they see Afghanistan as an important country, and Afghan nation is beginning to see the opportunity of becoming part of the BRI project as an economic uplift. And recovering from the the geopolitical landscape that they have become by foreign intervention. And that leads to the hope that this time perhaps a regional approach towards an Afghan peaceful solution will be preferred over an extra regional approach.
All right, all right. Now, Brigadier Tipu Sultan sir, when we talk about the role of the different parties in the Afghan peace process, of course, there are the two main parties involved. We had issues with the with the Afghan government because they said, why did the US talk directly to the Afghan Taliban? But then, of course, things were mended out between the two parties. How important has been Pakistan's role in bringing the two parties together in Afghanistan, and how important will Pakistan's role continue to be in the future as well?
Well, Pakistan has been pivotal, extremely important. It is the prime mover of peace in Afghanistan. Pakistan has always said that there is no military solution for Afghan problem. We have to sit down and negotiate. The Prime Minister of Pakistan was saying all along for decades, he was accused of being a Talib and whatnot. And Pakistan stood its ground in very heavy weathers and very difficult conditions. When the Americans have the dreams of hitting Pakistan at the time and place that we would not know in their new South Asia policy. What I feel is that Afghanistan's basic problem has been for centuries of infighting. Whether it was Babrak Karmal or Hafizullah Amin,
True.
Whether it was Muhammad Tarkei or Dawood or whatever. And now it is between Abdullah, Ashraf Ghani, Karzai and the Taliban, and Haqqanis have come up with a new idea that they are a separate force because Mullah Ahmad's son has been, Mullah Yaqub has been promoted as a political and military head under Habatullah. And lo and behold, there has been an alliance between the TTP and other factions also, and that is
a very important part of all of this.
We have to discuss. We have to discuss
exactly,
that.
very, very
and
important.
why has the Chief of the Army Staff visited North Waziristan in that area? Because the resurge of the Taliban over there and a few happenings over there, and how much the Durran line or the border between Pakistan. I would always call it a border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, not a Durran line.
But that is how it should be.
That is how it should be. The border, how much has it been fenced? The problem is that whatever you say, whatever China says, whatever Pakistan says, whatever Russia says, whatever Donald Trump's urgency for his elections is, the point is that, or what is that fundamental basis on which all Afghan factions are going to agree when they are so much divergent in their views, so far as Abdullah, Ashraf Ghani, Karzai, and the
what will bring them together? What has brought them together?
I think the Talib is maintaining this, that okay, the Americans should give us the time frame to leave, and after they leave, they will set everything right, and after 2 years, the Americans will come back and establish their embassy in Kabul. That is basically their punchline, that to give the Americans and the other parties are saying, like China and Russia and Pakistan and all that, okay, there should be no fighting, ceasefire, have a common ground, have a dialogue. Point is, it is the Afghan people who have to agree.
Exactly.
No
That is
matter-
the main issue here.
That is the main
Agreement
issue.
between all the different factions.
And Afghanistan, if I may humbly suggest, that the people of Afghanistan need to understand from their own history as to what has happened to them over centuries. You know, what has happened to them during the British Raj here, what has happened to them during the kingship of the Zahir Shah dynasty, what has happened to them when the Soviet Union crossed the Oxus River into Afghanistan, what happened to that, and what happened when the Americans attacked them. So I think if they, even during the rule of Taliban, across the Salang Tunnel, there were many incidences where the territory was exchanged in Mazar-e Sharif, in Badakhshan, in Panjshir Valley, and towards the Turgundi border, and Nimrod and all that. So it is basically I think the Taliban, although what I must recognize and say that the Taliban have known to have said that they are not looking to rule Afghanistan all by themselves. That's a major departure from their mid-90s.
Exactly.
You know, they are. And the second thing which is of fundamental and which is of a profound importance is that the people of Afghanistan have got a view now and a say now because of couple of elections, whether they were good, rigged or not, but there's some semblance of democracy in the Afghan society.
There's a beginning of a democratic
it is
process in
beginning of that,
Afghanistan.
and the Afghan people have started to think politically about their future,
All right.
and not all of them agree with Taliban. Although Taliban have got the power of the gun, and they control the rural area and the madrasas also.
huge
They
area as
survived
well
as
in
a political
Afghanistan.
and military force after 2 decades
All
of
right.
bombing.
All
But
right.
the-
Now, so
but-
Ali, I would like to cut you here because there's one or two aspects of Brigadier Saab's talk that I'd like to ask your opinion on. First is Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab, who said during his media talk that we are hopeful the peace process will succeed despite the spoilers. Now, spoilers is what Brigadier Saab also referred to when it comes to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and its new alliance with all the other different factions that has been happening, and we know what havoc TTP has done in KP and in other areas of Pakistan, and of course the visit of the COAS is also something in that very regard. Then there is the whole process of power sharing that also Brigadier Saab pointed out, that the Taliban somehow feel that they are now ready for a power sharing. These are two parts of the same question, but they all can become spoilers. The spoilers, A, TTP, and B, this power sharing process, if and when some party or some faction does not agree to it in the coming days. How can we move along this path so that we can also move in a constructive path so that all different parties and factions can work in harmony?
I think there are three aspects of Afghanistan which are interrelated and
All right.
interdependent.
All right,
The
Ali,
security.
I'll have to interrupt you. We've got Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab who's joined us. He's an Afghan affairs expert and a senior journalist and somebody I respect a lot. Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab, I was asking this question from Syed Muhammad Ali about two very important things. The spoilers, as has been pointed time and again by Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab in this peace process, and B, the power sharing that has been discussed during this show in the last few minutes between the different factions. How can people in Afghanistan, the parties concerned in Afghanistan who are part of this intra-Afghan dialogue, can work together to diffuse these elements?
I think it won't be easy, but efforts are being made because they are all Afghans, whether Taliban or whether part of the Afghan government. So they have to coexist. Taliban has said that they want to coexist. They want to work together with the other Afghans. They want to have a dialogue. So in a way, we never seen such a commitment for peace by Taliban in the past. The Afghan government has been creating hurdles, I must say, because, these exchange of prisoners, this must have been completed by now. And that is a big hurdle
True.
in starting the intra-Afghan dialogue. So in a way, I think that, it is their country. They have to bring peace. They have to work together. They have fought. They have killed each other. But, this has to end. 4 decades of war and conflict that has taken a heavy
But
toll.
Yousafzai Saab, do
on
the
the
parties
Afghan
concerned
nation.
understand the importance
So
of
I
ending
hope that
this stalemate or the status quo? Do they understand what you're just saying, this 4 decades of tensions in the region? Do they understand, these parties concerned, these two important parties that are part of this intra-Afghan dialogue?
In a dialogue. There is no other way, because after 19 years of war, there has been no military solution. So now it's time to have a dialogue to peacefully resolve the issue.
All right. Sir, do you feel that the two parties, it was what I was asking, the two parties concerned in this intra-Afghan dialogue, the Afghan Taliban and the Afghan government, and you said there are reservations or the Afghan government is not really moving ahead as far as this dialogue is concerned. Don't they understand the importance of getting away with the status quo, getting away with this tension that has engulfed their country since the last few decades, as you rightly pointed out?
I think they do realize, but it is, a struggle for power. And as we all know, these people have been in power for too long. They don't want to give up power.
All right.
And, if you look at this one issue of exchange of prisoners, initially Ashraf Ghani said that his government is not part of the Doha agreement between the US and Taliban, so he won't release these 5,000 Taliban prisoners. But then he said he will release them. Then he said that 400 among them have been convicted and they are involved in heinous crimes. They will never be released. But then he called this consultative Jirga and got an agreement, approval from the Jirga that they should be released. So I think that, these delaying tactics, dragging its feet, in the hope that maybe Trump will lose the election and Joe Biden will win and he will not withdraw the U.S. and NATO forces. That I think is something which is not going to work, because already we know violence is rising in Afghanistan. There has to be a ceasefire. There can be no ceasefire if there is no intra-Afghan dialogue, and there can be no intra-Afghan dialogue if the exchange of prisoners is not completed.
All right. Now, Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab, if this exchange of prisoners, in your point of view, is not complete, because there is a small number now of prisoners that is left to be returned by the Afghan government, do you feel that maybe the Afghan Taliban need to move a step forward now that most of their prisoners have been released, or do you feel they will still stand on their the same principled stand that we need all of the prisoners to be released before they can move along for the talks? And if they do not, then as you said, as the Afghan government is stalling this whole process till the US elections, how much of the peace process in Afghanistan will be left in the doldrums?
I think until now, Taliban have not shown any flexibility on the issue of the prisoner swap. They want all their 5,000 prisoners to be released. They are saying they already released 1,000 government prisoners who were in their custody. Now the Afghan government has to release 320 remaining Taliban prisoners. And the Afghan government is saying that Taliban are holding 22 of their commandos. They should also be released. Taliban are denying that. They say they're not holding any Afghan military or police commandos. So there is a dispute here also as to how many prisoners have to be released. But I think that, this is part of the Doha Agreement. And the U.S. has made a commitment that these prisoners would be released. So if you want to implement the Doha Agreement, then that creates, an opportunity. But if you don't want to implement that and you say that the Afghan government was not part of the deal, then I think these issues will remain stuck and you cannot move forward. The intra-Afghan dialogue is critical. That has to start. It has already been delayed for several months. This was supposed to happen on 10th of March, the exchange of prisoners and the start of the dialogue. So if you delay things, there will be disappointment. Violence is already on the rise. What do you want to achieve, I think? And then you have these new objections being raised, say like France and Australia, opposing the release of 6 Taliban prisoners because they say that they killed their soldiers. So the French soldiers and Australian soldiers came to Afghanistan as part of the NATO force. They came there to kill and be killed. It's war. So if people get killed in war, and then you don't want those prisoners who killed them to be released, I think that is, creating hurdles.
All right.
You don't want the issue to be resolved. And that is now the big problem, because there is not one hurdle but quite a few hurdles which are holding back progress in resuming and starting the intra-Afghan dialogue.
All right, thank you very much, Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab. Yousafzai Saab said there are more than one hurdles that are holding this intra-Afghan peace process from happening. We'll be back after a short break. We are discussing the intra-Afghan peace dialogue, peace in Afghanistan, and of course the two important factions that are to sit together in Doha, and what are the impediments that are holding them from going towards these talks. Brigadier Tipu Sultan Saab, we were listening to Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab before the break, and he talked about the Australian and the French also influence because they are part of NATO, and the number of Afghan Taliban that they do not want to be released because they feel that they have been behind certain incidents that have been detrimental to their forces. Do you feel that external influences will also influence, apart from the US influence, will also influence the Afghan government for not giving them this final number of prisoners back to the Afghan Taliban?
In Afghanistan, the major problem has been the interference of other powers that be in Afghanistan for centuries. It's not now. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And I agree with Rahimullah Yousafzai 100% when he says that the Kabul government is creating hurdles, because the delay is in their favor. As long as the Taliban remain inert, there is no fighting, and the Kabul government is sitting comfortably in Kabul. They would like to do that. They like to toe the Indian line. They'd like to, say that there should be democracy, blah blah blah, in Afghanistan. The moment I tell you, the solution is that all the foreigners should leave Afghanistan and let the Afghans solve their problem politically or militarily.
All right.
There is no other way. I am just waiting for the time when the Kabul government and Taliban sit together in Doha.
All right.
Only then the things will start to shape up.
All right.
But in all probability, what is going to happen is that this thing is going to linger on. They're going to blame each other, and then if and when the foreign forces leave, they will settle it.
All right. Now, Ali, there's one important point that Rahimullah Yousafzai also pointed out, is the delaying tactics that are being used by the Afghan government. And he was very adamant on that. He said that they feel that if, for example, this was just an assumption, I mean, we have to see what is going to happen in the US elections, but he said if Joe Biden comes into power and not Donald Trump in the upcoming US elections, there might not be that return of the US forces. But there is another aspect to it, all of it as well, is the influence of our neighbor, that is India. Haven't the Democrats been very pro-India, in fact even more pro-India than the Republicans?
I think you mentioned the role of international players in Afghanistan. I'll contextualize your answer, your question to that aspect. I think when you look at the current situation in Afghanistan, I'll link it up with my first comment, that the timing is very critical. Why it is critical? Because of the looming elections, the incentive is for the current Republican administration to achieve some sort of face-saving deal which they can sell to their voters as a foreign policy victory of the US, and criticize the Democrats for failing to bring the Afghan war to an end. But if the Democrats come to power, they will not have any incentive to rush into a deal immediately, which was initiated by the Republican administration. So Afghanistan might go in the background somewhat as compared to their Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific strategy and other considerations. So this concern of the current US administration to achieve some sort of deal should be seen as a useful stimulus. That is one aspect. The second aspect is when you look at the Afghan peace process, there are, I think, 5 strands. The structure is such that explains why the Kabul administration is so insecure and why Taliban are biding their time, because they know with each passing day the political, security and economic support for the Kabul administration is weakening. That is weakening the Kabul administration with each passing day. The time is on the side of the Afghan Taliban, and they are not dealing with only Pakistan and the US, mind you, because we overemphasize the Doha process. When you talk about the Doha agreement, essentially it means a bilateral agreement between Afghan Taliban
and the Afghan government
and the US.
Yes,
and the US,
because that was the initial agreement.
So who is missed out? Kabul is not there. So what the Afghan Taliban are doing, when they want to put pressure on Kabul, they have no incentive to deal with them directly. They talk to Washington. Recently, Pompeo had a direct call with the Afghan Taliban leadership, and they say, you committed us that you will make Kabul free our people. So if the Afghan Taliban are also smart, they don't want to stoop to the level of a weakening Kabul administration. They are waiting for them to crumble And if they want to negotiate, they want to talk to Washington, and they say, okay, Washington promised us this, that they will force Afghan Kabul administration to free our people or get us some concessions, and if they don't fail, if they don't achieve something, that they will put the pressure back on Washington, because they realize that Washington is in a hurry to achieve a deal. So they are very smart.
That hurry to achieve a deal, is it more political in nature or is it strategic as well?
I think it's a bit of both, but the political dynamic right now offers a window of opportunity that needs to be seized to translate into a strategic achievement. But there are 4 strands which I want your viewers to understand, that besides the bilateral Afghan Taliban US strand, which is the Doha Agreement, there is a bilateral strand which you are witnessing today in Islamabad between Afghan Taliban and Pakistan. Then you have Afghan Taliban, China, Pakistan. There is a trilateral strand, and then there is Taliban, you know, have also visited Moscow. They have also links in Iran. They have also been talking to the Chinese. So Afghan Taliban is talking to everybody in the world. Whereas that explains why Kabul is becoming diplomatically also insecure, because with each passing day, like I earlier pointed out, the external and international economic, political and security support and assistance is drawing down.
But Ali, I understand all these different strands that you are talking about, and I'll come to you as well, Brigadier Saab, and because I want your opinion on what I'm going to ask Ali. Ali, you talk about these different strands and the political weightage that the Afghan Taliban is garnering over time because of its linkages that it is creating with the different countries. But why isn't the Afghan government doing the same?
Because, like I earlier pointed out, with each passing day, Afghan Taliban, the bottom line is, are bidding their time. They are waiting for the Afghan current administration to weaken politically, economically, because if I'll just give you 2 examples.
Okay.
If the foreign financial resistance reduces, what does that mean? That makes the Afghan National Army becomes ill affordable for the Kabul administration. So what is the incentive for the people who were recruited in Afghan National Army to serve and listen to Kabul? They will not work for them. They work for money. They are professionals. They might leave. And you know, most of the attacks which Kabul has witnessed recently are coming from their own ranks. So basically, this house of cards, let me frankly tell you, is crumbling, and Afghan Taliban are playing a very calculated waiting game and taking on board all the international players. But like Brigadier Saab earlier pointed out, the real litmus test would be, can they convert their power into popularity on the domestic political front beyond the Pashtun factions? Can they also learn from their mistakes? Can they also reach out to other factions, for which Pakistan has played a very pivotal role? And let me appreciate the very important role of Ambassador Sadiq in reaching out to every Afghan faction, that this should be an Afghan solution, not just a Taliban solution.
That is so true. Brigadier Saab, what's your take on that? Because, you know, here I feel that in the beginning we started off saying that it was the Afghan government that was doing the bidding and waiting, playing the waiting game. But now, as per what Ali is saying, both factions are playing the waiting game and both are bidding their cards in this whole political scenario. What's your take on that, sir?
Some people are saying that the waiting game, Kabul government is to benefit. But I will tell you one thing. I think I will say it again. Whatever you may say, I think the Taliban from inside understand that as long as the Americans are there, as long as some sort of a support the government has from different countries in India, the Taliban will not succeed fully and totally. Therefore, they are interested that the US must withdraw and must give them a time frame, and they must withdraw from Kabul. The international community is really caught up in the circumstances. They don't want the fighting to begin again in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan should be thrown into a turmoil once again. I think the ideal situation would be that the neighbors of Afghanistan, like Iran and Pakistan,
That they have been talking to, as Ali pointed out.
and let me tell you that the Iranians are very good with Taliban as well, and the Kabul government too. And if the foreign forces leave, and you know, if they don't do mischief with their RAW and CIA and all that, and they leave and
Will-
leave.
will that really- will they really leave, to be very frank?
Themselves, eventually they will have to. One thing, whether the Democrats come into power, whether the Republicans come into power, one thing has been drilled in their mind well and proper, that they cannot fight in Afghanistan any longer. They have been defeated, and you cannot reinforce a failure. That is the principle of strategy. They have failed. They cannot reinforce their failure in Afghanistan. The only thing they can do is to arm twisting and, you know, withdrawing money from the Kabul government here and there. But in Afghanistan, they have to, in Doha, the Kabul government and Taliban have to sit together to thrash out things. In all probability, I hope it does not happen. In all probability, what is going to happen is that the Afghan are going to settle their score forcefully through violent means. I hope not. Politically, they are not agreeing on a common agenda.
All right.
As it looks to me now.
All right.
Pakistan holds the key because Pakistan has got some say in Afghanistan, some leverage with Taliban. We have got our border. We are economically so intertwined with each other. The Afghan government, you know, depends a lot on Pakistan, supplies through Karachi from Pakistan.
And of course, in the long run, the CPEC is going to play
whatever
a
the
huge
Indians
role
may
there
say,
as well.
whatever they may say, they have been yearning that they should, Pakistan should open Wagah border. And
Yes.
the trade to flow over there and all that. But nobody can replace Pakistan and then Iran, so far as the economic dependability and the political and the business and the financial leverage is concerned over Afghanistan.
All right.
So,
All right. My final comment to question to you, Ali, is an extension of what the Brigadier Saab has been saying. Have Taliban really understood? Have they democratized themselves a bit? Have they understood the value of working together with other parties? Or do you feel that there's going to be an internal conflict once the Americans leave the scenario? A. And B, do you feel that both sides will understand the impact of any aggression that follows if the intra-Afghan dialogue does not move forward in the requisite time and space? As you pointed out, time is of the essence.
Just 3 points. I think it's very important that 19 years of conflict have also influenced Afghan Taliban. It has not been a bed of roses for them.
True.
And although they see their revival of their political relevance by virtue of their sheer strategic stamina, and they have been, you know, welcomed in Doha, they have been welcomed around the world, so they see it as a fleeting opportunity. It is very important. They are showing some signs of limited flexibility
All right.
with other factions in order to be acceptable to them.
So you are agreeing with what
Yes,
Brigadier
yes,
Saab said?
but the culture doesn't change overnight. That is an unfortunate reality. But very important for Pakistan is that besides what Pakistan needs to discuss and negotiate today with Afghan Taliban, with all the stakeholders, is this, that in return for facilitating this very critical process, we must ensure the security of our western border. We must ensure that whoever comes into power does not allow the territory of Afghanistan to be used against us,
Pakistan.
against Pakistan. It must ensure that spoilers, and let me name them, TTP or BLA must not be allowed
Or
ISIL be allowed to use their territory against Pakistan. This is very important, and if Pakistan is able to secure these commitments in return for facilitating this process, is going to be very important for us.
All right.
This
Last
is
comment
one
from you.
Subtle difference that you must have noticed. I think the Pathan nature and the nature of the Taliban has come to fore. We don't seem to realize that the statements made by the Americans, by Pakistanis, by the Kabul government far too many compared to the Taliban interpreter or spokesman. The Taliban are keeping their lips tight.
All right. Sealed or
They are
tight?
not saying anything
All right.
whatsoever. So that is their nature. They can wait, and they understand the situation much better, much better than any other party. Let me assure you that.
All right.
The Taliban, they know their strength, they know their weakness. They're flexible now more as compared to the 90s. But I think
Their actions still speak louder than their words.
I think their silence speaks much for them.
All right. All right. The Afghan Taliban's, as per my guest here, it is pertinent to them that the Afghan Taliban silence speaks more than their words, and of course they are the people who we need to linger on and hedge on as far as this Afghan peace process, this intra-Afghan peace process is concerned, because as you say, it takes two to tango. Without both these parties sitting together and working out a certain way to move forward for peace in Afghanistan, peace can never come in Afghanistan. But then there are different other question marks as far as the involvement of the US or other countries in Afghanistan is concerned. Are they ready to give the Afghan factions that time, that space, that place to work for their own country, or will the foreign powers continue to have a role, to have a say? And how important will Pakistan's role also continue to be, because Pakistan has been instrumental as far as Afghanistan and of course the bringing the Afghan factions together is concerned. Only time will tell. Allah Hafiz.